The adjustment brush it's one of those tools inside of Camera Raw that's really powerful for what we can do to a raw photo that's all non-destructive. So I thought it kind of deserved its own 101 tutorial, how to get started with it, where you can go with it, what are the possibilities with it. So let's start off here in this photo. And the way you use the adjustment brush, it literally is a brush that lets you paint on effects to your photo inside of Camera Raw with a brush. All right, so you can paint on exposure and saturation and color and all these things. But the first thing that I do is I develop the photo using this basic panel here. All right, so I would try to get my white balance good, which honestly here, I'm not quite sure I'd make too much more of a change here. I think it's looking pretty good. Exposure, I think, is a little bit on the bright side when it comes to the bright areas in the middle here. However, the sky kind of looks okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to bring the exposure down a little bit. Okay, because I kind of do want to just kind of reel in some of this white area over here. In doing so, you're going to see it makes the sky a little bit darker, but that's okay because that's why we have things like the adjustment brush. Recovery, fill, light, blacks. I mean, not too much more that we have to do here. I might maybe pump in a little bit of vibrance for some extra color. But let's get right to the main point here, which is the adjustment brush. So it's in Camera Raw 5 and above, which this came out with Photoshop CS4. The good thing is here is if you don't use Camera Raw or you find yourself using Lightroom a lot, everything I'm teaching you here works just the same in Lightroom. Okay, it's basically the same tool. It just kind of looks a little bit different. So when we select the brush, we are automatically in what's called new mode, which means it's going to create a new adjustment brush setting for us. So what I'm going to do here, let's go ahead and let's just click. And when you click these little plus and minus buttons, watch what happens here. I can crank up all these different sliders, do these crazy things. If I just click plus next to exposure, it moves exposure plus toward the plus side, and it zeroes out everything else. So you don't have to go moving everything to 0. Again, you can see everything is offset from 0 here. If I just click minus, it takes me minus a half stop and zeroes everything else out. So that's a quick way to kind of just get in your settings without having to move them manually. What I'm going to do here is brighten it here. We'll do it by maybe about a quarter of a stop. And what I'm also going to do is turn off auto mask. I'm going to zoom in on this photo and I want you to see what starts to happen. Let's go over right over onto this side here. I want you to see what starts to happen. You can control the size of the brush. The feathering is, see that inner circle and outer circle? Well, as I move the feathering amount, you'll see that that's how soft the brush is. So a really high feathering amount means a really soft brush. So I'll keep it right in the middle here. And as I start to paint along these edges, you're going to see that the effects not only go over the sky, but they also start to encroach into the actual object that I'm painting. You can see a preview before and then after. All right, so that's kind of difficult. So what I'm going to do here is clear all. All right, and I'm actually going to take the size of my brush down a little bit and turn on auto mask. What auto mask lets me do is it protects basically the edge. All right, what's going on here, and let me increase the exposure a little bit more so you can see it. What's going on here is Camera Raw is looking at where that center point of my brush is. All right, so I want to make sure I keep that over the sky. I don't want to move it. If I start to move it over, then you'll see it starts to bleed over there. So I don't want to do that. I want to keep it over the sky, and I don't worry about the rest of the brush because that's where Camera Raw is doing its magic of auto masking. All right, so that's how I can get in here and start to paint this edge. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but let's just kind of finish up. Right along the side here. I said I'm not going to spend too much time. Let's zoom out and just do a quick swipe here. But you can see it's very nicely protecting that contrasty edge, and that's where all this comes from, is because it is contrasty. It's protecting that contrasty edge. A lot of times when I'm done with the edge, I'll turn it off because the brush will work faster when auto mask is off. All right, that masking stuff takes a lot of processing power. So if I don't need it, I don't use it because I don't want to slow things down here. So you'll get a lot more responsive type of a feedback here when you turn it off. All right, but it did keep me from having to worry about that edge. And now what's nice about this is it's got a little pin. That little pin right there means I've added an adjustment brush to this photo. And with that, see the black mark in the middle of it? That means that that pin is active, meaning I can come in here and I can adjust the settings. So I can make it brighter. I can make it darker if I wanted to. I mean, if you really wanted to go really dark for a special effect, you could. But I want to make it look like a little bit of a brighter sky. And then we can even come in here and we can add color to it. See this color option down here? So if I click on it, it opens up a color picker, and if I click blue, now I can make the sky a little bit of a deeper blue. And if I click on that, and it's probably a little bit too blue here, but let's bring down the saturation a little bit. Okay, and we can again hit our preview before and then after. All right, so that takes care of the sky. So what's next? Well, if I continue to paint and I want to go in here and add some contrast into these letters on here on the sign. If I continue to paint, I'm going to be painting the same effect. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is hit new. All right, I'm going to hit new, and then I'm going to crank up the clarity setting. So I'm just going to hit plus here and then really crank up clarity. And let's zoom in, and now I can start to work with not exposure. I don't really want to brighten or darken any part of the sign. I just want to add a little bit more punch to it. So now I'm going to start to paint, and you'll see what it starts to happen here. See the contrast that we're adding? That's what clarity does. Clarity adds contrast. All right, and again, I'm not going to do the whole entire photo here, but let's go through, zoom out a little bit, and see if I can get that too. Okay, and the best thing I can do, because if I show you the preview, the before and after that I've been showing you, we're going to see the preview of everything, including the sky. So what I'll do here is I'll just bring clarity back down to 0. That's before clarity, and that's after. So you can see the difference of what it did inside of here. Okay, so there's one more area. Let's go ahead and let's back out a little bit here. Notice that there are 2 little pins on here, and the meatball icon is in that pin. And by the way, hovering over shows you the areas that you've painted. So notice that I've painted here. Notice how it bled over into the sky. If I want to, I can take my brush over. It's in add mode. I can take it over into erase mode. The keyboard shortcut is Option on Mac, Alt on a PC for that. But I can just click erase as well. And notice you can see all those little areas where I kind of bled over. So I could take a smaller brush, just bring down that brush size here, and I could paint along those edges and just kind of get in there. All right, and now if I hover over, you'll see that I start to remove some of it. Okay, so you can see that's just kind of Camera Raw's way of showing you what you've painted over. But notice that there are 2. So if I wanted to switch between the 2, I just click on one. The little meatball goes from one to the other one. All right. Well, I'm going to add one more here. Let's go to new. The last thing I would want to do is a little bit of extra sharpening. So I'm going to zoom in. And you can do that right inside of here. All right. Like you can sharpen inside of Photoshop, I can click the sharpening slider over here and really crank it up. And I can add some creative sharpening. I don't want to sharpen the whole photo, but what I do want to sharpen are some of these detailed areas. So again, just start to paint. And let me zoom way in on this one so you can see it a little bit better. Go through here, some of the light bulbs. All right. And again, since it's going to be a little bit hard to see if I show you the preview before and after, because that's going to show you all the effects, what I'll do is I'll take sharpening back down to 0. So that's without here. Let's zoom in a little bit more so you can see it better. All right, take sharpening back down to 0, and then we crank it back up to 100. See the difference? That's at 0, or close to it, and that's at 100. So now I can get creative with the sharpening, and I'm doing it all with the adjustment brush. I'm not having to go into Photoshop and create layers and do all those things, which is fine if you have to get a little bit more precise, because let me leave you with this. The adjustment brush is great. Sharpness you have to be zoomed in at 100% to see, which is kind of a pain sometimes. The adjustment brush is great, but it still just doesn't always have the precise type of a feel that the brushes have inside of Photoshop. The brushes in Photoshop are just a little bit superior, and you've got a lot of the pressure sensitivity if you've got one of those tablets and things. So you do have more options in Photoshop. However, with a photo like this, it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of finessing going on. There's a pretty clear-cut edge, so the adjustment brush works great for Camera Raw here and keeps me from having to go into Photoshop to do this. But there's a lot of power in this. What's nice about it is I can switch. I can go back to the panels here. I can start to, come in here and add some more vignetting and things like that if I want. And if I ever decided I wanted to go back and change something, all I got to do is click on the adjustment brush, click on one of these little pins over here to select it. It remembers my settings, and now I can go and I can change them at any point and at any time that I want, because it is all non-destructive. That's the kind of the cool thing about Camera Raw. All right, well folks, hope you enjoyed. My name is Matt Kloskowski, and I'll talk to you again soon.